It is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a Sunday morning, and 3-0 Fighting Illini football team for the second year in a row. 3 of the last 4 years, Illinois has went undefeated in the non-conference, and this year no exception. And yet again, it was a tale of two halves. And one sec, just making sure this microphone is the one. Yeah. Tale of two halves like it was with Duke, but I think a little bit more concerning, because of the opponent that you were playing, far less talented than a Duke team. And the fact that all the positives that you saw in the second half against Duke, you would have liked a little bit more carryover in that first half last night. You didn't get it. But then I thought about this. There's a positive spin to be had about a game in which you didn't play particularly well. It's the fact that it's coming before your first really marquee matchup of the year. And I think from a coaching perspective, there's a lot of value in the fact that you are coming off of a 38-0 win, but one in which your head coach came out and said in the press conference, had him super pissed off at halftime to the point where he said he hit a board or something like that and his hand was numb after having done so. I take him at his word, and as I was walking outside of the stadium during halftime and thinking, should I be angry? Should I be concerned? What emotion should I feel after that goal line stand? I was able as a fan to just kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, let's let the second half play out and see how they respond. That's the most important thing. Well, they responded beautifully. So if we were to give the team a grade for last night, when you have a C- first half and a straight A, I think for the second, you probably find yourself to a B- or maybe a B if you're being generous. Now, that's a good place to be as a fan, where we get to nitpick a little bit as to the quality of the win, where in years past, I'd take a win any way, shape, or form. And this idea that I was having, that this could be a tune-up game, for lack of a better term, it kind of came to fruition in the way that this played out. A tune-up game in that I think once again, you tried to instill a run game from the outset, no matter what Western Michigan was putting in the box, no matter what they were showing you defensively. And you got a little stubborn because you wanted this identity to work. By gum, you really wanted to show that you could run even if there are 8 guys in the box. And when that didn't pan out, I thought that Lunny pivoted, maybe a little bit too late, but what the heck, the second half was really good. But he did pivot. So the question as they go into the Indiana game will be, why not just pivot from the outset? Why not, when you're at Indiana, similar to how you did at Nebraska last year, come out in that first drive offensively and sling that ball around? I'm comparing these two games because I think there's a lot of similarities between the Nebraska game last year and the timing of it, and the game that you were coming off of, and this year, the Indiana game and the game you're coming off of with Western Michigan. Take a little trip with me in the time machine. Last year, you play Central Michigan at home. You start 3-0, and that game was not pretty. I think you won 23-7. Ho-hum, whatever. Now, my expectations for that team were not nearly as high as this one. So as I'm walking outside of the stadium afterwards and getting back to the tailgate, I'm just gleefully happy that we're 3-0 by any means necessary. And Central Michigan was very mediocre last year, and you didn't play your A game, but it was a win, and we were all happy for that. Would it have given us a lot of reason to believe that you were going to go into Nebraska in that environment and play as well as you did? I'm not sure. And keep in mind, last year, through 3 games, the offense had really not had any sustained bits of brilliance. The Kansas game, the offense was very up and down, and they got the big plays when needed in the second half, but they were not lighting the world on fire yet. The Nebraska game, you finally saw that offense click basically for the entire game. You saw the defense with a good game plan keep a talented quarterback and offense basically in front of them for the most part in a very tough environment. All of that to say, if we're looking for carryover between the Western Michigan game and the upcoming Indiana game on Saturday, I think it is okay to use last year as a bit of precedent for the idea that you can have a kind of game before you have maybe your best game of the year. And that maybe for this coaching staff, being able to go into this week armed with the psychology necessary to say, guys, I know you won 38-0, but we got a long way to go. I think there's so much benefit to that. We'll see how it plays out. I'm not going to go so far this week as to guarantee a victory at Indiana because there's a whole host of variables going into that against a really good Indiana team. Are they great, though? I don't know about that with Indiana. I think they're very good, and they'll probably win 8-9 games this year. That's a really good coach, and the talent infusion that he's brought with him is impressive. I think Illinois can be great, and that might seem weird to say after the first half that we saw last night or the first half that we saw against Duke, but I do think this team can be great. There's a few reasons why. You got the quarterback, and I know Luke was not his most efficient in the first half, but when he has to turn it on, he does. And I think that he's also a gamer where I'm not too worried about whether or not Luke is going to be up for Saturday's game in Indiana. I'm pretty certain he will be. So you have the quarterback. I think you have the defensive line. And while Western Michigan was not the staunchest test that you will face this year by any stretch, we have seen 3 games consistently. The defensive line and that rotation, which is pretty wide, have played well. And they look the part. Sometimes you can just look at a line and say, oh, those guys are big. And I was pointing this out to my dad last night. It looks different on the defensive line, where it used to be a Johnny Newton would be such a standout, and he would on any defensive line, but more for Illinois that probably lacked the size and the strength that you see now. While you might not have a total game wrecker on the line, if we're counting Akis as an outside linebacker, which your call, but the interior line, let's say, to me they just look different. They look better, and you're keeping them fresh with that much bigger rotation this year, and that's paying dividends. No team has been able to run the ball effectively on Illinois. Indiana is probably still pass first. I know that they probably want a little bit of balance, but with the quarterback Mendoza that they have, they're going to sling it around. Okay, fine. But when they have to run it on a 3rd and 3, I feel pretty good about this defensive line in those must-run situations. And you see them be disruptive as well. And they're really making things easier for the likes of a Gabe Akis or a Pat Farrell or an Alec Bryant. I am very heartened by what I've seen from that defensive line. Okay, so quarterback, defensive line. I'll throw running backs in there. And when you see that offense open up and start to sling it around, which I think they will do from the outset against Indiana, because there's no reason not to, that opened up things tonight for Fagan and Valentine, who both looked really good. So Barry Lunney, after a great game, a great second half, I should say, at Duke, had a bad first half against Western and a great second half against Western. I think that he is the kind of coach that has shown an ability to adapt fairly quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see Bielema, who this week in the press conference after the game criticized openly Lunney for that 3rd and 1 call where they just gave it to Fagan. Everybody in the stadium knew it. Western Michigan knew it. 8 in the box. They stopped him for a loss. It was a frustrating play call because on one hand you could say, well, you should be able to get a yard. Yeah, I guess. But if you see literally 8 in the box and you know Western Michigan's selling out on it, burn him deep or just let a wide receiver make a play and get that first down so much easier than trying to just ram it through. I think Bielema and Lunney on their Monday meeting, or maybe they meet on a Sunday, will have a conversation about, okay, we wanted to be a run-first offense. We wanted to be the team that instilled our will from the outset. That's not how this is going to play out. Even with this experienced offensive line, maybe it's not 5 guys that are total bruisers. But for the most part, they're sound in pass protection. And when the defense doesn't know it's going to be a run, that offensive line's pretty good at blocking the run as well. I want to see that change right away. I hope that when I'm standing at the very top row, come to find out, of Memorial Stadium in Bloomington, Indiana, that the first Illinois offensive possession, they just go for it. Sling it around. You got the quarterback. You got pretty good wide receivers. A couple catches they might like to have back with Dixon in the end zone, and Elsie had one on the sideline that he probably should have had. But other than that, I think they're playing pretty well too. Your bread and butter is your quarterback and passing game, and that opens up everything behind it. So there are reasons for optimism. We're going to talk today about the Western Michigan game. I want you guys that are in the chat thread, and we got some people tuning in across our 3 platforms, so good Sunday morning to you. throw in, how do you feel going into this Indiana game? And what about yesterday's game against Western Michigan either encourages you or frightens you, for lack of a better term, as we get ready for Illinois' first Big Ten game of the year? So, hey, if I sound a little worse for wear, I look a little worse for wear, and I probably do, it's because it was a full-day tailgate, and it was hot. It wore me down to a nub. But we made it, and we're 3-0, and that is a worthwhile Saturday any way you slice it. All right, before we get too far into things, got to remind you, the 200 level is brought to you by Hamilton Walkers. Steak, seafood, and spirits in downtown Champaign. Hamilton Walkers, my personal favorite place to eat out of all the great restaurants in town. And for me, it's the mix of scratch kitchen, which means everything is made in-house. And you can taste that difference. Great bartenders and the best old-fashioned in town, for my money. But also the service is really what sets them apart from other places. So whether it is an informal dinner before you go to Illinois USC in a couple weeks, or whether it's a formal date night with your partner, Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, steak, seafood, and spirits. Also, State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy. He can be your guy as well. Brian, I think, was on the field yesterday. I was in the restroom, and I came back, and I think Brian, before the game, because he's a veteran, he was recognized, or there was some honorary thing. So that's pretty cool for Brian, who I know is a huge Illinois fan, and appreciate him being partners with us and also just working personally with me and my wife in our house. And it's been very easy to work with Brian the last 5 years. So go online at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. It didn't feel like it yesterday. It does not feel like it today. It's going to be another hot Sunday, But you will need that furnace check sooner rather than later. Yes, we will dip back into the 40s in the evenings, and that furnace is going to have to kick on. Make sure yours is in tip-top condition by scheduling your furnace check with Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend, at 217-841-4728. And finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com for your home improvement needs. Check out a gallery of their work online and get a free quote while you're there at owenbuildersllc.com. Hey, best way to support us, the 200 level, is support our sponsors. Also, for those that are watching or listening, wherever you are, like, subscribe, follow, all that jazz. All right. Illinois, Western Michigan. Let's do a little bit of the tail of the tape here, and I see a few comments coming in, so light those up because I will get to all of your comments about yesterday's game and how you're feeling going into a big one at Indiana. First thing, the day itself and being in lot 31 on a 90-degree day, packed to the gills. And we sat a little further back, but especially as I walked towards the stadium, it was madhouse for a game against Western Michigan. I got to give Illinois credit. I think this promotion of family weekend, when you already have Dad's Day and you got Mom's weekend in the spring, brilliant. Give families another excuse to come into town, especially for younger students. It's a month into it. They probably, whether they're homesick or the parents are having empty nest syndrome, it was a really good turnout, both in the stadium and in the lots. So I really noticed that walking in and meeting my dad at the ticket gate before we went in about 5:30, that this was not your typical pre-game experience for a MAC team. And I think back to last year with Central Michigan. It was a decent turnout. I'm guessing maybe 45,000 or so for the game, and certainly in the lots, but this was different. Night game helped for sure, but it was not energy that you would expect for that opponent. And as my dad and I go into the stadium and we take our seats, which got moved, but they're still pretty good. Like we did okay in that reseating. We're looking around the stadium with 10 minutes before kickoff, and it's essentially full. Students are still trickling in as they're finishing their final drinks before they get in the stadium. I get it. I've been there. And I guess I still kind of do the same thing. I get a little roadie sody on the way from the walk from the car to the stadium. I did know that when I went into the game yesterday, though, I had a liquid IV packet and I got a water, and I was like, I can't have a drink right now. I got to chill because I felt that heat more than I expected. And maybe it's because we had this unseasonably cool stuff for the 2 weeks prior, but man, it kind of slowed me down, and I yawned a few times during the game thinking, man, when I get home, cold shower, sleeping like a baby. And boy, did I ever. So my dad and I are looking around the stadium, and it's just cool. It is just cool. I love that stadium at night anyway, but a sold out crowd, and it looked it, and it felt it, and it was not the most exciting first half, and we left because just for him and just accessibility and stuff, we got out of there at halftime, got him to his car, and then I ended up going back with the group that we had the tailgate. Not that we were cutting out early for being angry or anything, but despite the fact that first half was not the most exciting, it was still so cool to be in that environment and soak it in and think, you know what? I don't know about a rival, because what is a rival? Is it winning a Big Ten championship? For a lot of programs, that would be the rival moment. But for me, a rival is just simply, and I've said this for years, going into that stadium and being excited to watch my football team. Because for so many years, that was not the case. The excitement was not there. The tailgate was fun, and then let's hope we don't have to leave after the first quarter trailing 4 scores. Maybe a bit hyperbolic there, but no, it was bad for much of my life. So as we get to look around, and then my dad is sort of his first time in the stadium this year, seeing all the different game day kind of wrinkles that they've thrown in on the video board and just the overall production values of that stadium. And this is before we get the big sparkling new scoreboard and video boards and sound system next year. It's pretty top notch. And the stadium itself just looks so freaking good, and the team looks good. Orange and blue just pops at night under the lights. It's cool to be a part of something that feels like a legit football program. And call it a pinch me moment, I don't know. But on one hand, I am pinching myself, and on the other, this feels entirely natural. And I think that dichotomy can be explained by this. It's surreal in that in my life, it has been few and far between the seasons that I've been able to look back on with football and say, that was fun. That's the surreal part of it. This is new in terms of on-field success and expectations. The part that does not feel surreal is that I thought all the infrastructure was there for this to be a really top-notch game day experience. And I get this from people that come into tailgates. So my wife's family from Michigan, they're here last year. And they talk specifically about how cool is it that you guys have all these lots right next to the stadium. That's not the case in Michigan. There's a golf course. That's a big lot. I think the biggest up there outside of Michigan Stadium. It's fine and all, but you're pretty sprawled out. There are people that open their homes and their yards to parking, and that's around the stadium, and that can be cool. But as far as a concentrated setup like Illinois has, that is not normal. So you got that. You got a beautiful stadium. And listen, I thought the geese stuff yesterday, the signage, it's fine. I don't think the name detracts anything away from Memorial Stadium. I thought they did a really good job, as they so often do, with branding and the colors. I thought it popped. I thought it looked classy. It's not garish at all. You got the tailgate. You got the aesthetic look of the stadium. And now you have a team. So I just felt like, on one hand, sure, I could pinch myself and say, what is this reality I'm living in, where I'm really excited to go in for a game against Western Michigan? But on the other hand, thinking, no, this is right. This is how it should be. And that's not to say that Illinois football will year in, year out have college football playoff contenders. That's going to be the next step for Bielema if we're going to be merely a very good program, which I think we would all take. Or if Bielema is going to find some key to unlock that door to being an elite program, whatever that looks like in the NIL era. And maybe we will. I mean, I'm not going to discard that. And this is the first time in my life where I have actually pondered, could we become that? We'll address that later, though. As far as just enjoying a good team in a great environment with a sold-out crowd, it was both surreal but completely normal. It felt right. And I think that it's okay to be comfortable sitting in this and not feel like we need to offer anyone an explanation. We don't need to say to anyone, yeah, well, I mean, I know I'm doing it here for context, but if I were to talk to a football fan of another team, I'm not going to get into the history, the not so good history of Illinois football as a qualifier for, and now this is why it's so much fun. No, I'm just going to go straight to the fact that, yeah, we got a good program, and that's that. And I don't need to talk about Tim Beckman or Bill Cubit or the tail end of the Ron Zucker Turner years. This is what it is right now. And it really struck me yesterday as I was perusing the college football forum or subreddit on Reddit. Now, for those who don't know, Reddit is an online message board that has all these subreddits or groups depending on your interest. There was a college football one. There was a separate Wisconsin Badgers one. And in both of them, I noticed, and this is the algorithm, must be picking up the fact that I like reveling in other teams that used to annoy the crap out of me struggling. There was a Wisconsin discussion about how this NIL era has ruined college sports and that they're doomed and whatever. I mean, I never really liked college sports anyway. I mean, I'm not exaggerating that much after their loss yesterday to Alabama, who they themselves didn't look that particularly great, but Wisconsin just looked straight up boring and not that good. And they are living in a reality now as Badger fans after 25 years, essentially, from Alvarez through Bielema in the early Christ years, of being the team that won 9-10 games a year. And they're ready to punch out. And I thought, wow, all these years that I've talked about wanting to be like an Iowa or Wisconsin. Yeah, that's what you are under Bret Bielema. And the staying power and the sustaining of success that has been so difficult for Illinois in the past seems much more attainable now. I was just really struck by the fact that just like that, in the blink of an eye, almost, a proud football program like Wisconsin can just fade. And their fans' attitudes toward it can completely change. Not apathy, they care, but they're sort of despondent in thinking, are we ever going to get back there? I'm not going to actually enjoy schadenfreude over this. I'm not going to take pleasure in their pain, but I'm also not going to feel bad for them. And I just find that contrast really interesting as I was at the game last night and watching other college football games and seeing scores come across and thinking, man, we got it pretty good right now. We have it pretty good. And knowing the crazy fans we have, and I mean that as a compliment, and knowing the money that our alumni base has, I see no reason why that can't continue. Keep Bielema long as you can. I think he's happy here too, because again, the idea of Illinois as a stepping stone job made perfect sense in a pre-NIL era where there were systemic things not in your favor that other schools might have had. That has vanished. And I know that the NIL stuff has hurt other programs and probably hurt more programs than it's helped others. But it is a good time to be an Illinois fan across the board because of that very factor. And yeah, I don't know. I just found it interesting to see Badger fans essentially just throwing their arms up and saying, well, it is what it is. In the NIL era, we just won't compete like we used to. Wow. Well, I don't know what to tell you, Wisconsin. Like, spend the money. You know, just figure it out. But I don't know. They feel stuck with their AD and their coaches. Too bad, so sad. I don't know why I felt compelled to go in that direction, but yeah, it just kind of hit me yesterday. Maybe there is a little schadenfreude. Who am I kidding? I'd be lying if I said there wasn't. Let's talk about the game. Illinois, Western Michigan. You damn near got outgained in the first half. I mean, it was pretty even Steven, right? After Western Michigan had their final drive that you had the goal line stand. Props to the defense, though, for that goal line stand. I don't want to whitewash that or just skim over it because games have moments that are where the fortunes swing. And that was one of those moments. After which I thought, okay, you're up 10-0. I know Western Michigan's getting the ball, but just stop them after halftime and then go blow the doors off this thing. And that's exactly what Illinois did. Looking at the stats for this game overall, you had Illinois with 20 first downs to 12 for Western Michigan. Third down efficiency. This is impressive, and this has been a hallmark of Henry's defense this year. Improved upon from last year. Western Michigan 3 for 14 on third down. Illinois 7 for 12. Pretty good. Fourth down efficiency, Western 0 for 2. You didn't have to go for 1. Rushing yards, Illinois 162 to Western's 113. Passing yards, Illinois 196 to Western's 91. Total yards then, 358 for Illinois versus 204 for Western. Sacks, 3 for Illinois, 2 for Western. Got to clean that up, though. I think that aggressiveness from Western Michigan, that has to be better countered by Lunny, and expect Indiana and USC to just throw the kitchen sink at you and just counter it with the quarterback that can make quick reads and get the ball out quick. Don't let him have to sit back there in a play action or roll out unless you really need to, where he could be a sitting duck for an approaching defensive end. I digress. No interceptions, no turnovers yesterday. Damn near an interception from Xavier Scott. We'll talk about him in just a bit. Punts, hey, I thought Crimmins, great game from him. 4 punts, 46.5 average. 8 punts from Western, so that tells you they couldn't stay on the field except for really those 2 drives at the end of the first half. Penalties, Illinois 5 for 46. You'll live with that. I think anytime your penalty yardage is under 50, that's pretty good. And possession, 31-33 for Illinois. And I like that only because Western was going to run the ball. I think as the game went on, you did an even better job by controlling that clock. But here's the thing. I used to be just such a sucker for like a huge margin in the time of possession, thinking that was the end-all be-all. When Illinois sped things up in the second half, naturally the time of possession will go down. And I think that's a trade that you need to make. I think that you need to have quicker offensive series where the tempo is up and you aren't worrying about the clock so much, and you're really just worrying about moving the damn ball. And that the defense has enough depth where they can withstand being on the field for 30, 31, 32 minutes a game. I think that what you will find beginning this week at Indiana is closing that gap between what Illinois probably wanted to do coming into this year, which is be Wisconsin circa 2010, and just control the ball, run it down opponents' throats, throw it when you need to with an efficient quarterback. I think that was the notion coming into this year, but that's not what you are yet. You can still be effective, but just do it in a different way with an up-tempo offense, a little bit more no huddle, some more RPO, which Luke is so good in and can really make the right read more often than not. And the fact that you like your receivers, maybe more than you anticipated. So I want to go over those stats to just kind of provide context for the game. Let's talk about some of the individual players that stood out. Xavier Scott we'll start with. The good news is apparently walking completely fine after the game. Is he going to be icing that ankle? Is he going to be staying off of it for the next couple of days? Precautionary? Yeah, I'm sure. We'll get confirmation on Monday or tomorrow whether or not he is actually injured or not, but it sounded promising at the end of the game. Bielema did not indicate anything or even say, oh, we aren't really sure with him. He said, I think he's fine. Paraphrasing. Same with Melvin Priestley. But Xavier Scott was so good last night, and I found that he was playing outside a lot. To me, this is a factor of 2 things. One, he can do it, and he can do it well. You're going to see that against Indiana with some of their wide receivers, depending where they line them up. You'll see Xavier on the outside. But to me, the most interesting thing about that is when you have a guy that's a shutdown corner, essentially, that's what he's become, then it allows you to have more interchangeable parts elsewhere in the secondary. Tanner Heckel got a lot of playing time yesterday in the nickel, star position, whatever you want to call it. He did good. I mean, he looks the part as only a redshirt freshman, I think. Sophomore in terms of he's been here for 2 years, but redshirt freshman. So he looks the part. And if you're comfortable with him there and Torrey Cox on the other end, then the odd man out is Caleb Patterson. And I don't want to be one of those that picks on somebody because there's been a few bad plays. I'm not watching Caleb Patterson every play. I try to key on a few, and then when I did yesterday, they weren't throwing on those downs. And I'm like, well, now I'm missing the play because I'm trying to focus on one guy. So I don't want to speak out of school here and say that he is the only culprit of a couple of the defensive breakdowns this year, but he's not playing well. And even when he got the fumble or forced it against Duke, that was only after his guy blew right past him. So it's what it is. And you got depth. And your best 5 right now probably does not include Caleb Patterson. When Jaheim Clark comes back, now you got more to play with, and he did not play yesterday. Okay, was that precautionary? Do you see him back on the field against Indiana? And even if you do, how much can you throw Jaheim Clark out there in his first game of the season? Much as they might like him, that's a lion's den that you're going into with good wide receivers and a good quarterback. So I think you're going to be pretty close to the vest. I think you're going to see Xavier Scott on the outside, and I'm comfortable with him there. I'm comfortable with him anywhere. They could put him at the deep safety position. You also saw Mac Resetich in there a little bit. I saw Miles Scott on a play or two play corner, if not more. So it'd be interesting to get the snap counts and see how they were mixing and matching that secondary. You got dudes back there. It's just figuring out what groups of 5 are you most comfortable with. And what first, second, and third options for those 5 are you going to go with? I bet Caleb Patterson's in one of those 3 rotations. I just don't think he's in all of them. And you will see him continue to play. They aren't just going to bench the guy. I don't think he's done anything to necessarily warrant a full-on benching. And you want to keep the other guys fresh. So he's going to get tick. I just feel like they're going to plan around him, just so he's not the guy that gets burned, that he's the guy that they put on, well, whoever the third option would be, or at least of the outside wide receivers, which one they are less concerned about, or maybe has some help over the top with either Bailey or Scott or Rasevich. So that will be interesting to see Aaron Henry, how he game plans around that. But I do appreciate the fact that they're recognizing this isn't working so well. We got to try something new. What rotations or combinations can we throw out there? Kudos to Henry for that. Also, just straight up, kudos to Aaron Henry as a coordinator. The identity, I should say, of this defense is very clear. They are not elite, and that's okay. They don't have to be elite, but they do make it difficult on the other team to score. The nature of football is long drives are difficult, and it takes just really fine execution from the offense. To me, Illinois' defense is sound, and they got some dudes as well. So they got playmakers, but not across all 11 positions. But there are very few guys that I worry about when they're out there about missing a tackle or missing an assignment or something. They're just very sound right now. That's impressive. I think that's credit to Aaron Henry. And the fact that if you really go back to last year, starting with that Kansas game, that defense has been good more games than they have not. There were a couple stinkers in there. Rutgers, they weren't very good. Parts of that Northwestern game, they weren't very good. And would we throw, well, Oregon's Oregon. But, other than that, I thought last year was a big improvement for him. And now all of a sudden, are you looking at a just straight up good coordinator? Like no qualifiers, no, well, yeah, but what if he's just straight up good now? And he's figured out, this is the talent I have. What is the best defense I can run with him? I think the same way that I appreciate Barry Lunny for being able to adapt to the game in front of him, I got to give that to Aaron Henry for the plan he has going into the game. And there will probably be times this year where he needs to change things on the fly. And actually, we probably have already seen that after the Duke and Western Michigan first halves. You saw the way Western Michigan ended that first half. Well, what did they do offensively in the second? Nothing. So whatever adjustments Henry made and his coaching staff on that side of the ball worked 2 games in a row. They've been so much better in the second half, and they were fine in the first. I'm really encouraged by that. A guy that I did not love, let's say, but I acknowledge that, man, Aaron Henry's defense, when push came to shove last year, they got the job done. They're a year older. They're returning basically everybody, so they should be good this year. Yeah, they've been good. And I think what's also exciting about that is the depth that they have allows them in the fourth quarter to be every bit as good as they were in the second. And that will pay dividends against Big Ten teams. I also think that the complementary aspect of this, which it's such a cliche with football, but it's true. The idea of complementary football really does bear itself out with this team and the way that they play. So Aaron Henry's defense having to be up there 30 or less minutes per game, you can work with that. And the guys that they have and the depth that they have allows them to still be flying around if the other team were to have the ball, let's say, in a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. I feel like that defense will be fresh. I feel like they can make a play late, whereas 2023 especially, you got down to it in the fourth quarter and you're like, oh God, they're so going to give up a score. And trust me, I was livid with some aspects of Henry's defense in 23. I thought, why are we just, going to roll with this guy after a really bad 2023 year? And I think that if you're Bielema, maybe loyalty played a part of it, and that would be understandable to an extent, whether that's right or wrong. But I think that Bielema might have recognized this was the personnel that he had to work with. I think this guy with more depth and older players will be a good defensive coordinator. I think Aaron Henry's good right now. He just is. So the numbers bear that out. I know Duke got their yardage, but you kept them under 20 points. They lost, by the way, to Tulane, 34-27. Tulane was up a few scores, I think, so Duke must have mounted a late comeback, but not enough. And I don't know why you're playing at Tulane anyway. And that's Mensa's old school, so I'm sure Tulane was pretty pumped up for that game. That's a good program, really good group of 5. And Duke now is going into ACC play 1 and 2. I think they get 7 or 8 wins when all's said and done. But now some of their opponents, like a Georgia Tech, looking tougher. Georgia Tech, man, that was a great game against Clemson yesterday. We'll talk before we get out of here about some of the other games in week 3, which was not the best slate, but man, the good games were great. So, yeah, I think overall, though, as I kind of put the lid on, I'm about to get to your comments. Again, throw your comments in about yesterday and how you feel going into the Indiana game. I'm going to get to all of them here in a second. I am still more encouraged than discouraged. I'm encouraged by the fact that the discouraging aspects of yesterday can be taught out of this team and that the coaches themselves can have an impact on that. That Barry Lunny and the way he calls the game can directly impact the way we feel about the offense in the first half. That can change that immediately. You don't need to wait for that. And I don't think we will. I think that he will be very much aggressive from the outset against Indiana. And the best way to win a game like that, score early. You beat Nebraska because you essentially you beat them because you played 60 good minutes of football and you were dominant in the overtime period. But you put yourselves in a position to win that game by taking that rabid fan base on a Friday night looking for their first ranked win at home and God knows how long. And that opening drive score from Illinois made you think, oh, damn, we could win this thing. And sure enough, you played a good game from there. I know Illinois knows they can win this game, and I know that offense knows they can put up points against Indiana. I expect them to do that. But I am excited to see early on, maybe a little more anxious than excited, because I'll be honest, that pit in the stomach will be going a little bit Saturday around 5:30 to see how Barry Lunny approaches that game. But I imagine it will be aggressive. No more, for lack of a more appropriate term, no more dicking around. Just, you got a good offense. Let's see it. Defensively, it's going to be much of the same. I think that you have a good quarterback you're facing. I think Menz is probably more talented, but Mendoza, under the coaching staff that he has, is probably going to have the more efficient numbers when all's said and done this year, despite not being maybe the pro talent that a Darian Menza is. So I think Mendoza in that regard is a quarterback more likely to beat you given the tools and the coaching staff that he has around him. But I do think that this defensive philosophy for Illinois can keep Indiana to around 24, 27 points. Yeah, I think this can be a high-scoring game. I think that you're going to have to get closer to 30 to get the win. I think they can, though. And that defense, I think you could still turn in a good performance giving up 24 points. I mean, I'm not going to look at that and say, boy, the defense sucked against Indiana. No, games like this, you're going to give up some points. And that's okay. Don't expect a shutout. I think, though, that it will be interesting to see going into this Indiana game and not having a lot of tape to work off of with Mendoza as the quarterback. Has Indiana's offense fundamentally changed from last year? Now, Bielema made a very interesting comment yesterday. He came out and said, we've been game planning since the spring for Indiana, which tells me they probably looked, A, at Mendoza's tape from Cal, and B, that they have been looking at all the Indiana games last year, as a team would, and I'm sure Indiana did for Illinois. We're going to talk more Wednesday about this game, but if you're wondering, how should I feel about this? Well, Vegas has Indiana, I think, is a 2.5 or 3-point favorite. It's essentially a pick 'em, because isn't home field worth 3 points? I think that's the old rule of thumb. It is a pick 'em. Okay, in pick 'ems, what do I look for? If I were a betting man actually worth a crap, which I'm not, but if I were, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the more experienced team. I'm looking for, if it's a road dog like this, I'm looking for a team that typically plays better than the spread would indicate, and especially on the road. Bret Bielema does that consistently. I'm pretty sure I saw a stat last night that Illinois this year already is plus 77 points against the spread, which would make sense because if you were 23.5 or 27.5 yesterday, that's 11. You were 45-19 against Duke. So right there, that's against the spread, another 23. So already you're at 34, and then whatever the spread was, Western Michigan. But maybe that's a little bit I don't know if that number is correct, but regardless, I know for a fact that Bret Bielema, his teams perform amazingly well against the spread. Yeah, I feel good about it. We'll talk more Wednesday why. I'm not going to guarantee a win or any of that because I'd be bloviating at that point, and it's you never know. It's sports, but don't you feel good though? Despite the first half against Western, don't you feel good too? And you should. You got an old team. They've been through things. They should feel good. We should feel good. And if it's a close loss, okay, fine. Lick your wounds, beat USC at home. But you should be bullish on this team despite the first half yesterday. I love the fact that we can come here and talk about this team and talk about the issues on this team, but actually do so in a way almost like a objective football fan that is not worried about the rug being pulled out from under us. I don't have that sense. It's so cool to just talk about the game and the sport and what we're seeing from the team and not feel like, oh, God, but what if they don't get that 6th win this year? Like, that is a new thing. Even last year, I said, just make a bowl game. Well, they did more than that. This year, it's your team is good. They have things to correct. Okay, we can work with that. Fans of good football teams work through that every year. Man, this team that I expect to go 12-4, Kansas City, their fans have done this all the time. Apples and oranges, not saying that Luke Altmaier is Pat Mahomes or anything, but they get through week 7, week 8, and they're still tweaking and finding out things so that they are at their peak when they need to be. I think that this team, similar to that scenario, is finding their way through it. And you have a coaching staff confident enough in the group they have to be tweaking on the go, fine-tuning as needed. But now 3 games in, there is a little bit more urgency going into this week. You can't fine-tune a whole lot during the Indiana game. When that thing gets rolling in that environment, you got to be ready to go. I expect them to be ready to go. And from there, it's just who's the better team over 60 minutes. I think Illinois, on a neutral field, would win 6 or 7 of those games. It's not a neutral field, though. And that's what makes this a tough challenge, but one that come late Saturday night, if they win, imagine how good we'd be feeling. And it would be very deserved to feel great after a victory like that. All right. Got the comments here. Going to load these up real quick. Appreciate you guys tuning in on this Sunday morning. Going to get out of here before the NFL starts. And the Bears. The Bears. I'm going to go on a run, listen to the first half, whatever. But, it's the NFL. And I wouldn't be surprised if they hung. Enough about the Bears. Good morning to you, B Mills. Hello and happy Sunday. And it is always a happy Sunday when Illinois gets the win the night before. From Brick Girl. It felt as though the team didn't show up in the first half. And I guess the coaches were able to wake them up at half. So Brick Girl talking about that, to hear Bielema be so direct about how this is essentially the angriest he ever had been at an Illinois team at halftime, I think speaks a lot to their expectations for what this team can be. I've kind of liked Bielema's demeanor this year. It is very much businesslike, and that little moment of candor says a lot about what he wants them to do and the goals that he has for them. And I'm sure that the team is set for themselves. But yeah, I was encouraged by that, and even more encouraged by the response. That's 2 straight weeks where you've had phenomenal second halves. And when both of those units are cooking, and I don't see any reason that when they just kind of figure out these last few things, I don't see any reason why the offense and defense can't cook for most quarters in most games. I don't. I think as much as I like Lunny overall, he got in their way offensively as much as anybody in the first halves of the last 2 games. And he probably would own some of that himself too. I think he can figure that out. But I think the entire team as a whole can figure that out, where they can be a really consistent team that's just really good. I firmly believe that. From B Mills, O-line performance has definitely been concerning the last 2 first halves. And that's interesting, B Mills. I'm no offensive line expert, but I remember in 2023, I feel like they went from a zone blocking scheme to man-to-man midway through the season, and especially at the Maryland game. And they just started going more straight up because that was what worked for those 5 guys. And they got Fagan going, and they got the run game going, got the one at Maryland, lost to Wisconsin, but they were better in the second half of the year for sure than they were early. I do wonder, why can't we just have a dominant offensive line? But all that said, as good as this offensive line is, it's still not the sort of caliber that you would get at a Michigan or Ohio State yet in terms of dudes, right? Just big dudes with pedigree on the offensive line. They've had to work to this point with a lot of these guys. And outside of a J.C. Davis and a Melvin Priestley, how many are going to be in the league? I don't know. Is Josh Gesky going to be in the league? Or Kreutz or Henderson? I don't know about that. There's other teams that have a few guys on their lines that would be in the NFL at some point. So what I'm saying is, whether it be zone or man blocking, like, is it a scheme thing? Is it a talent thing? I think that when you see this line get cooking midway through the season like you did last year, I think that is much more to do with the team as a whole figuring out who they are and what they're good at. I do wonder if the O-line hasn't been a bit set back by this Illinois team or this coaching staff thinking, let's try to be this thing. And hopefully after week 3, they figured out, well, we aren't going to exactly be that thing, which is Wisconsin 2010. Instead, we're going to be efficient through passing the ball quickly, opening up those lanes for Khalil and Caden and Aiden when they get back. And that takes a lot of the onus off the offensive line. I think they're still good. They've been not good in the first halves. You're correct. But it's no coincidence that the second halves, they've been great. So just bridge that gap and be a good offensive line, like I think we all expect them to be, and at times great. I do still think there are those moments in those games and those matchups where they're going to keep Luke upright throughout. They're going to get 200 yards rushing. For 3 games, are there concerns? Yes. Are they things that they can work through and fix? I think so. Because they got the veteran experience. They got the dudes, at least dudes enough to be a really good offensive line. Maybe just putting it together took a few weeks. We'll find out at Indiana. Is it going to be a whole first half of the year thing? Or after 3 weeks, did they finally click in some way? Because they look great in the last 2 second halves. Illinois, this is from Jason. Illinois has an O-line coach problem. We've seen these slow starts by that group way too much, and don't get me started on Patterson. Jason, I'm not going to dispute the fact that Bart Miller, for all the accolades that sometimes get thrown his way, and clearly Bielema likes him a lot, we've seen Bielema make changes with position coaches, and I don't think anything should be off the table. If you are the program you want to be, and you continue to have these early season struggles with an O-line, even when it's a returning group of 5 guys, yeah, it's worth looking at. Out of all the position coaches, I don't have a lick of complaints about anyone else. I don't. Thad Ward and the running backs, they're good. Wide receivers, Justin Stepp's been awesome for us. Jameson in the D-line, great. Who is your linebacker coach? Archie McDaniel, I think. Corey Parker in the secondary, no complaints. I got no complaints for any other position coach. I do have questions about Bart Miller, and hopefully those get answered week 4 in a positive way, and you just think, oh, I see, okay. But then you wonder, is Bart Miller thinking, damn it, man, if Barry Lunny just called it this way, then I wouldn't run into these problems. You wonder what that dynamic is like. But regardless, they got to be better from the jump. And I would agree, these slow starts are really weird, especially for a Bret Bielema team. Pretty sure Bart Miller's been here from the start, right? And by midway through each season, the O-line's pretty good. At least it's a good O-line when you don't think about him, right? Where you don't, oh, wow, Luke hasn't been sacked in a while. Oh, yeah, we're running the ball effectively. The ones you don't notice really are the best O-lines. They get to that point often. It just, yeah, I don't disagree, Jason. It is okay if you want to be the program that you want to be, to keep an eye on certain position groups and see, are there trends that are worrying? And I don't disagree with you. From Big Tota, Valentine looked phenomenal. Should for sure be getting more carries going forward. Tota, I think that'll take care of itself. He's really good. He's got a burst. I love this contact he's initiating, as long as he doesn't get hurt. But the fact he's like going shoulder first into guys and just knocking them over, for a guy that was pretty skinny last year, he's got burst. He's got swagger. Great name. Khalil Valentine is a great football name, isn't it? You got a really good running back room, and he's the most dynamic of them. And I think he'll continue to get more carries. But I think Fagan, a really good night for him. It was a slow start, but was that the offensive line? Was the play calling? Fagan got going. I think he is your fourth quarterback for sure. When you are in the lead and you're winning the game, and he's going to get carries throughout, you're going to lean on him late. But you even saw Valentine get carries late, and he's every bit as effective. I really like that kid. It's fun to watch him. And Billy agrees. Valentine's going to be a stud, no doubt. No doubt. Already is, and I think what's exciting is next year when you start thinking about the roster, despite all the guys you are losing, there's still a lot coming back. So I don't think next year's team will be as good as this one. I think that'd be very hard to do, but I think they can still be good. And then you got some major holes to fill, no doubt, but now you are armed clearly with the money and hopefully with something more to sell after what we hope is a successful 2025. From Big Toda, cautiously nervous about next week. Some is holding over nerves from previous years, but if we can put together two halves, I think we come out with a win. Toda, if Illinois plays well in both halves, they win, which sounds oversimplistic. I think they're better than Indiana. I think I know, which sounds a little, bold, but this is a team that is better, I think, across the board than Indiana. But it's on the road. Indiana's going to be up for it. You're going to have to play well for both halves. And if you do, I think you win. I just think you're better than them. At most possessions, you're more experienced. You can play well on the road, and this group of guys have before. So, yeah. I also like, and this is so random, but I think Bielema thinks about these things. You got a night kickoff, 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 our time. That means 3 of your first 4 games have been prime time. So that Saturday routine, or I guess Friday in the case of Western Illinois, that wait all day for the primetime kickoff, you're used to that. Indiana, I think they've had 1 primetime game so far, and that was Friday when they beat Indiana State 66-0, which, whatever. I don't know what that tells you. But yeah, I think that this team is already well familiar with primetime games. It'll be interesting by Monday afternoon. You might be listening to this later, but we'll know the USC time. Will that be another primetime game? I wouldn't be surprised. From Jason, concerns. Sorry, there we go. Just lost it there. Concerns for Indiana. You start slow again, and they were up 21-0 at half. Bowick's injury being non-contact and eliminating him the way it did reminds me of Dudek. Indiana will attack Patterson. Jason, that's depending on how much Patterson's out there. But when he is, will they be looking for him? For sure. It'll be interesting, too, Jason, to see if you don't get Miles Scott at the corner position more and Rasetic playing deep safety. And you saw that a few times yesterday. I think the coaching staff seems to be well aware that Patterson's not clicking right now. They try to give him some more reps. There was a first down conversion for Western late in the second quarter yesterday that, he misplayed. And eventually, come on, man. Like, he was fine last year. He wasn't great, but he was fine. He's struggling. As far as Bowick, and I'm glad he mentioned him, that is a concern. I'm sure we'll learn more tomorrow. I have no inkling as to what it was. I mean, he just went off the field, didn't even really see it happen, and then he wasn't out there anymore. He looks good when he's out there. Whether it's precautionary or not, hard to say. So we'll know more Monday, but that would be a loss, and I hope it's not for more than a game or two. But can you withstand it for a game? I think so. But what that would require, I think, is Elsie making a couple catches for you. I think Dixon as well, and both of those guys had dimes from Luke that they should have got yesterday. They would have been really good catches, but they should have caught them. From Jonathan, I think teams know that we want our identity to be the run, so they stack the box. We had outside routes every time, so it was much more our stubbornness than their scheme and play. I think stubborn's a good word, Jonathan. I would agree with that. And Lunny often is not stubborn. So throw it around, man. Throw that ball around against Indiana, and let's see what happens. I think they will. From Truthfully Speaking, my main concern is the slow starts. Bart Miller O-line continues to underperform early in the season. We finally have competence on our sidelines, so Bret will have this team ready for IU. Agree wholeheartedly, truthfully speaking. Michael Lee is counting down. 3 down, 7 more to go. Oh, there goes Michael. I would agree with that. Lon mentioned that countdown, like each win. You're counting to 10. You're counting to 10. From Michael Gerard, I'm hoping that they were just experimenting and exploring in the first half because they thought they would win. That was Barry's worst half of calling for a good while. Hopefully that's done and over with. And yeah, Michael, I'm wondering too, was that the worst half for Barry since Nebraska 2023 at home? Where I remember after that game thinking, why is this guy here? That was so bad. And I know there were a myriad of issues for that team, but yeah. All right, from NC Orange Crush. Ryan Walters as a DC is a maestro in game play-to-play, game calling. Lunny is not, but given time at halftime, always delivers. So hopefully it improves with this team. Yeah, to me, what would you prefer? A guy that is brilliant at the pregame game plan, like going into it, or one that's better at adjusting? Well, preferably you have a mix of that. I think Barry can be both because we saw, man, in 2022, it seemed like his scripted drives especially went right down the field and scored. Last year, first drives were pretty good as well. I think that's still in him. And maybe it was figuring out the wide receiver room or gaining enough confidence in them where you could be more aggressive early. But I expect Barry to settle in for the first half as well. Because when he's in his bag, like he was the second half, the last two games, he's a good offensive coordinator that might be in line for a head coaching job. I just really appreciate the efficiency of that offense when they get going. It's not the sexiest offense, but it is very efficient. They keep the ball, they possess it for long periods of time, keep the defense fresh, and now they're really good at finishing drives. And if you remember 2022, that was the bugaboo. No more. They finish drives at a really high rate. So that's encouraging. All right. Well, thank you guys for commenting, and thank you guys for tuning in on this Sunday morning. Before we get out of here and listen to the Bears, whatever, wherever your NFL team might be. If you're a Packers fan and an Illinois fan, you're living the dream right now. But we're going to be back Wednesday to do a podcast ahead of Indiana. I will be at the game on Saturday, so I don't know when Sunday we would get the podcast going. Whew, it's going to be a big one. You know, this is a fun week and a game that a lot of people will be talking about and looking forward to, and this is what it's all about. You know, I was thinking when I made my Costco run today, I was thinking to myself, you know, yeah, but I'll be a little bit nervous before the Indiana game just because that's what happens. But on the other hand, I went to the bowl game in Orlando, and, you know, that was a big game and a big opponent, but just trust in this team and this program that they are quite capable of playing well in big environments. And that's what I'm going to do. So they could lose. They could have a bad game and lose by a couple scores, and then we're licking our wounds and saying, oh, boy, you know, what do we have to do before USC? That's all on the table, but I think there's enough tape and enough precedent to suggest that this is going to be a heck of a game and that you are fully capable of going in there and getting it done. And what a triumph that would be. So I hope that's the case, and we'll talk more Wednesday about this upcoming marquee primetime NBC matchup between Illinois and Indiana. And no, it's not a basketball game. Pretty exciting stuff. Before we get out of here, again, appreciate you guys tuning in. Before you leave, if you could like, subscribe, follow, whatever place you're listening to. We got 3 different streaming platforms right now on X, YouTube, and Facebook. So good to see we got about 120 total in there right now between them. So enjoy your NFL Sunday. Before we get out of here, reminder that also support our sponsors. That's the best way to support us. And that includes Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits. Whether it's for a formal date night or an informal pregame meal, Hamilton Walkers is the best spot in Champaign-Urbana. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Schedule that furnace check. Eventually, it'll get cold. 217-841-4728. And finally, Owen Builders, LLC. Online at owenbuildersllc.com for your next home improvement project. Check out a gallery of their work and get a free quote while you're there online at owenbuildersllc.com. All right, everybody, stay cool. Have that liquid IV, which I'm about to have after my run here. And I guess enjoy the heat while we have it, though it looks to be beautiful on Saturday night in Bloomington, Indiana, for what is sure to be an awesome night of football. Have a good rest of your NFL Sunday, a good early part of your week, and we'll see you on Wednesday. It is the 200 level.